You've got the single control ring here, which is focus or zoom, and you can adjust that by flicking that switch here. Auto or manual focus button, and then a little control dial here you can use to adjust your exposure, and precisely which bit of the exposure you adjust is determined by these buttons here, iris gain and shutter speed. So you press one of those and then tweak the little dial and it changes the setting. There's a menu button here for getting into the menus, little headphone jack there. The auto manual switch here doesn't put the whole camcorder into auto or manual. It's purely auto exposure or manual exposure. So you can still be on manual focus while that is switched to auto. But when you do switch to auto, the camcorder is taking care of the iris gain and shutter, and you will still have to physically switch in the ND if the camcorder starts flashing ND2 or whatever on the screen at you to tell you what it wants.
If we look at the side of the camera here where the hand grip is, right here where my index finger is, there is a button for zooming in for focus magnification. So this just zooms in the image on the LCD. And that makes it really easy to check your focus. And I can do that with my index finger. Then I have the zoom rocker here. And then where my little finger is, there's another button. And this button is a one press auto iris button.
Inside the camcorder, when you flip open the screen, and let me point out another slight annoyance of this, every time you open the screen or you pull out the viewfinder, the camcorder switches on, whether you want it on or not. And even though there is a power on-off button, if you open the screen, flip out the viewfinder, it powers on.
Hey, there's your start-stop. To start recording or not, there's another button on top for the same. And that little button to the right of it is the rocker for your menu, so you can scroll up, down, sideways with that thing, and it works very well. And there in the middle bottom of the frame is the ND filter selector, and above that is the switch that allows you to go into full manual or full auto. And up there you press that, and there's two different settings for zooming in on your frame for sharp focusing purposes.
Audio is at the usual Pro level with two balanced XLR inputs on the handle, controllable in the usual ways by a panel of switches and dials on the other side. Should you wish to go into stealth mode with the X70, the handle detaches quickly and easily by unscrewing two knobs and sliding the assembly backwards. Refitting it is the exact reverse.
The X70 has a counterintuitive two-channel select option on the XLR handle. So if we're looking at the XLR handle, on the left-hand side there, you can see where it says RIC CH Select. When the button is down on the channel 1 option there, you're actually getting the audio sent to channel 1. So the first XLR input goes to channel 1 and the second XLR input goes to channel 2. When you push the button up, channel 1 audio gets sent to channel 2. My way of thinking is if you had the button set up to the top option, you'd have channel 1 coming on channel 1 and channel 2 coming on channel 2. So you'd have the discrete audios coming in. But no, it's the other way around. With it down on channel 1, that means that it goes just to channel 1 and channel 2 gets its own audio. So it's almost like it's back to front. I don't know whether that's an error or a bug or whether that needs to be changed in firmware, but that's definitely counterintuitive as far as I can see.
There on the lens you'll see a little AF/MF button. By pushing that you can go into autofocus or manual focus, and then by the rocker switch above you can either manipulate the focus or the zoom by turning the knurled ring on the lens. You'll see a menu button that activates the menu, of course. The iris, if you're in manual mode, you press that and turn that knurled knob to the left and you can put the iris anywhere you want to. Same with the gain. Same with the shutter speed.
And then white balance set, this menu option is the one you use to actually set the values in the A and B memories of the white balance. I did say it was complicated. You end up selecting a white balance A or B using two buttons on the camcorder. Then you come into the menus, you go into the white balance set, and once you've set it, you press the menu button, the joystick button again, while pointing the camera at something white, and it does the usual white balance setting. Next menu down, a whole load of settings for how you want the camcorder to sort of be set up to make life easy for you. For example, you can have the histogram switched on You can have your zebra markings, and you can set whether they're on or off and what level you want them at. You've got peaking, what colour you want, how aggressive you want the peaking to be, and whether you want it on or off. You can assign these, by the way, to the assignable buttons within the camera. So for example, I have histogram on off, zebra on off, and peaking on off on 3 of the buttons.
A constant histogram is very useful for setting exposure. The Sony has a white balance button, but it doesn't display the usual sun, shade, and incandescent options. Instead, it cycles between auto and 3 user presets. To set a preset, you push the white balance button and twist this dial to make your selection. Then you open the menu, select what you want to set again, and then set it. 2 of the 3 presets require a white card to set. White balance is inexcusably complicated.
This does 422 colour 10-bit, and that means it is recording colour information in much more detail than the consumer models. Now, the good side of that is that it means you've got a lot more flexibility if you are doing colour grading, if you're trying to make things look filmic. This will have all the colour information you need. It also means, if you want to use this as a green screen camera, that it does very well for that. Because it gets all that colour information, it's easier to key out the green and just leave the colour you want. The camcorder does have a tendency, I think, to overexpose in certain circumstances. So for example, a lot of the highlights get clipped off quite nastily, but as I've said, you can adjust all the settings in this so as to sort of roll off the highlights a bit more gently and give you a bit more control over how the camcorder shoots, so that's fine. Other things it has while shooting, quite a good stabilization system. It's either off, it's got standard stabilization, which doesn't do an awful lot, but if you're standing still and just holding the camera on quite a wide zoom, it will stabilize it a bit. And then the active stabilization, which crops in a little bit on the image, but it does mean you can do some very smooth walking along shots, either holding the camera by the handle or holding it by the strap on the side. You do get some nice smooth movement, and certainly when you are zoomed in full, that active stabilization comes into its own and does hold it very steady indeed. The viewfinder, there is a sensor in this so that as you bring your eye up to the viewfinder, it switches the LCD screen off and switches the viewfinder on. And I found, while I was out filming, that even standing sort of at this distance, trying to look at the screen, it detected I was behind it and turned the screen off. I had that happen a couple of times, so that was slightly annoying. I'd like to be able to switch that functionality off and just have both the screen and the viewfinder on at the same time. Let's not mess about with this. It is a great little camcorder. The single large control ring at the front changes either focus or zoom, selectable by a switch, and you have the option of toggling auto or manual focus with a button here too. 3 small buttons determine which aspect of exposure you want a small thumb wheel at the front to control. Any of them, all or none, can also be put into automatic mode. Unusually for this size of camcorder, genuine neutral density filters can be switched in by a small toggle on the back. A button above that activates manual or automatic exposure, although the NDs always require your input. The OLED screen is clear and displays plenty of relevant information. You can toggle and configure various parameters in the menus so as to show what you prefer on screen, such as guide markers, audio meters, and so on. The usual range of visual aids, including a histogram, zebra bars at 2 levels, and peaking in various colours are also provided and can be toggled on and off via the assignable buttons if you wish. You can also clear the display of icons so as to actually see what you're filming, which can be helpful.
For exposure control, it's very easy. there are 3 buttons here: iris, gain and shutter speed, and these allow you to manually control each of these settings through this little wheel here. On the back of the camera there is a switch to switch between auto and manual very quickly, and then when you're in manual there is a selector here to select the ND filters. The camera has 3 built-in ND filters plus a clear position, and that really allows you to control your depth of field. This is a 1-inch sensor, so it's quite a large sensor, about the size of a Super 16mm sensor, a little bit bigger than 2/3 inch. And by using that big sensor in conjunction with the ND filters, it gives you great control over your depth of field. So if you need a slightly shallower depth of field for a more filmic look, you can get that by using some ND. If you want a deeper depth of field, you take the ND out and you'll have a much deeper depth of field, which makes run and gun style shooting very much easier.
There's a dedicated white balance button here. It's actually rather fiddly to set the white balance on this camcorder. Once you've done it, you have to go through the menus. Once you've preset A and B, fine, it's then fairly easy to toggle through them just by pressing the white balance button and using the little scroll dial. It's astonishing to get this much functionality for that type of price. So it is a compact, professional spec camcorder that you could use for news, documentaries. You could do some filmic stuff on it, I suppose. You can get a shallow depth of field if you zoom in a bit and use those ND filters carefully. And then, of course, with that color information, you can do all sorts of nice color grading on it and give it a filmic look. So it's kind of a bit of a wonder camcorder, this. It really is. I mean, sorry if I sound like a Sony advocate here, but it's astonishing that they've managed to pack so much in for this price. But if you are looking for a compact, lightweight, low cost, incredibly low cost, pretty fully featured professional entry-level camcorder, here it is.